Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, change has arrived as reportedly Texas Tech is beginning a hunt for a new defensive coordinator.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you for this reaction episode of another variety. Had a conversation regarding the Red Raiders win over West Virginia. Now we have a conversation about what was anticipated coaching staff shuffle. We've been talking about this over the last week and really how it could impact both sides of the football, but we begin to get some clarity now on where the shuffle will begin as it relates to Tech's defensive coordinator Tim DeRuyter. Reporting beginning to stack up that indicates a change will be made there. And we'll get into it in just a moment, but I can only anticipate that means more dominoes, of course, to fall if you do have that kind of change being made. So rough season for that side of the football, and kind of wonder, maybe you feel like it was just inevitable that something would have to change. Is this something that's come about as the season has gone on, or what's your reaction to this coming about?
Yeah, we knew something was going to happen. We just weren't sure at what level, involving whom, or plural, and schematically, personnel, coaches, all the above. But Joey had kind of indicated in recent weeks, he's used the word frustrated and frustration a lot in many weeks, and it's we are both, and with kind of what we do, and I spent a lot of time around Tim since he's gotten here, and I think the world of him and his ability to coach. There were some really good times here in his semi-short stint. For whatever reason, it didn't really from the season opener on. It was just kind of a roller coaster. I think offensively, you were pretty consistently good throughout. Defensively, there were some moments where you were good. I don't know if like great or anything like that, but you played well, and you had your takeaways and all that. But then there was, and to Joey's point, I think what he's saying, in recent weeks, because he said this, I don't know, it was like a month or 6 weeks ago. Like, you have to play really good defense to win a championship, and that's ultimately what everything that we do needs to be about. And I think there's a lot of general consensus that you've got to be like top 40-ish or better on both sides of the ball statistically, and whether you point to total or scoring or whatever it is, you've got to live in that space. They were, I think Tech's defense was last year in the 60s, 63rd, 64th, and you were really old on that side of the ball. But even then, there was. But I mean, the guy could coach. He could develop, draft picks, if you will. I think Rabbit would tell you that. I think Tyree Wilson would tell you that. But we are in the people business. Yes, we're in sports, and we talk Texas Tech and all that. But ultimately, you and I are in the people business, and like there's two things there. It's hard. That's the hardest part about what I do in some of my roles is you get close to these people and you see them highest high and lowest low and all these things. But there's that's the people part, and this part sucks. But then there's the second word there. It is a business, and Joey is trying to. There's a lot of youth on this defense. I think that somebody will come in and have a lot of nucleus Some will point to it and go, well, you got a bunch of guys back off of not a very good defense. And I don't know if that's necessarily fair, but that I would get that statement. But they're just very young. I mean, you got a lot of guys that are, your redshirt freshmen and true sophomores and some things like that out there that played a ton of snaps for you. And the bulk of this group should be back together. And I think that you'll have a pretty good chance to keep Jacob Rodriguez here too. We'll see what happens. But, Calvin, I don't, and we heard from Joey after the game, and I'll kind of cite some of these numbers, but do we want to get into that audio?
Yeah, I think the most recent context also adds to what you're just describing right there, because for those that were listening to Coach McGuire's comments following the ball game, you may have picked up on just how much it was on his mind what didn't happen this year defensively. He cites it again when being asked about the performance specifically of his coordinators, and here's the answer from Coach McGuire.
The last few weeks, we've been trying to reflect on how we get better. I think that offensively, the last 2 weeks we played really well. We played with a little bit more tempo, and then defensively played well today. But whenever you look at the stats, overall defensively, we're going to be in a lot of hundreds. And you can't win. Like, it's almost crazy that you can win 8 games and have some of the stats that we have. So it says a lot about these guys that just walked in, Josh Kelly and CJ, and just the heart to this team and how hard they play for each other.
So, I mean, directly after the final win, final game of the regular season, Chris, he's talking about the evaluation that he says they've been going through over the last few weeks. And just like he said at various points throughout the season, he really emphasizes what type of defense you need to have if you want to be the type of team he wants, and that's one that competes for some conference hardware. So maybe a little subtle hint last night.
Because think about how many times you've heard Joey, we've used it, the term roller coaster as it's described your season. Calvin, just look at the last 2 weeks with just the defensive side of the ball. How different was that from week to week? I mean, how vastly different was your performance in Stillwater versus what you saw in Lubbock on senior day?
About 4 or 5 touchdowns worth, if I had to put a number on it.
I mean, and that's because you won games this year, 52-51 over ACU, 44-41 over Cincinnati, 56-48 over Oklahoma State. I mean, you're in the 52, 44, and 56 is what you're scoring, and you're barely winning, barely. And but then you have here's the frustrating part, and this is the part that I'm sure like Joey's like, will the real Texas Tech defense, just stand up, show me who you are. I can't figure it out because there was a trip to Tucson that was pretty good when Arizona was just coming off of a win over Utah. There was, I think when you went to Ames, Iowa, I thought you played pretty good. I thought you played pretty good for most, now the offense and a play call and Will Hammond and Zach Kitley and all that got blamed for this whole game. But you're up, what was it, 31-13, 31-14, whatever it was, with 6 to go in the third in Fort Worth. And then you can't. Yeah,
going back to like the call to kick a field goal. And I'm thinking, hey, that forces 2 TDs instead of a TD and a field goal that they will need. Obviously, you do that. I didn't, however, Chris, assume you would give those up in about the span of 90 seconds on the next 2 drives. I mean, there were so many times where it was just like, what just happened? Because it was a totally different look from maybe what you had seen in a previous quarter. And it goes back to what you started this with, the pursuit of consistency and getting off of that roller coaster. I mean, that's just one example.
You hear some of these national rankings, Calvin, like, Joey mentions 100s and stuff. Like, here's the sobering reality. And you can point to these numbers, but it's just hard data. And I think that if you look at some of the teams that are playing for conference championships this week, their numbers are vastly different. I think on this side of the ball, the one exception is you can live with subpar yards given up, maybe even subpar we're giving up too many points if you're really majoring in the takeaway. And that's why it was so good against West Virginia. You mixed in 3 of those, and then you don't even count. There was a turnover on downs as well. It was a drop pass, but that's what I think what is allows for some gray area there when you look at defensive statistics and things like that. But you are 120th in the country at giving up 34 points per game. You're 123rd in the country at giving up 451 yards per game, which, again, that's somewhat hollow. I'm more worried about how many points I'm giving up as opposed to yards. But this is the one that I think, because Joey kind of pinpointed this, I guess it was a week or so ago, when he kind of pointed to O-line play and he pointed to specifically pass defense. There's 133 schools playing in Division I football. You rank 132nd in passing yards giving up at 305 a game. And to give you more context there, I mentioned this, I think, in a show a week or so ago, but it's worth mentioning again.
First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers can bet only $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and a whole lot more, all in one place. So when you get a hunch, a gut instinct in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a gut feeling again, and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
And to give you more context there, I mentioned this, I think, in a show a week or so ago, but it's worth mentioning again. You played 12 games. This doesn't even count the Washington State quarterback, but 5 of your 12 games that you played, the opposing quarterback won some sort of award for their league the next week. Does that make sense? Like either a newcomer or offensive player.
You gave it to me last week, and you're sobering me up again. And I'm just thinking,
that's there's a direct correlation there, and I think Joey has pointed to, like, we are in close games, and we're not playing in the Big 12 championship because of how we defend the pass, and I think that's twofold in that. It's not just the secondary. It's at times lack of pass rush.
I think it's mostly, by the way, lack of pass rush. That to me is the chicken that comes before the egg.
Yeah, could be. And I don't know busted coverages and did so and so screw up? But yeah, there's clearly, because we would both agree that Maverick MacGyver and Sawyer Robertson. I mean, I like all credit to them and what they did on offense, but easy to have career days and win the award in their league the next week when you're just back there playing 7-on-7, because that's essentially what was happening. Just not even as so much as moving them off their spot or making them.
No, they're back there starting a new life,
and that's what is, I think, kept Joey up at night. But so I don't know. I would say, and I always say too much. Sorry. I think Joey really likes Tim, and I think Tim really liked it here. I can't pretend to know what goes on behind closed doors on philosophy and the way I want it done, or are we in agreement on what's the best way to go about this big picture? That is just a total unknown to anybody. And maybe only those two guys would be the ones that could answer that. There may be some that are close there that could go, yeah, there's, I just don't know where that would lie. And I'm guessing that maybe has something to do with this. Do you need somebody that I said this to you in the reaction, and I can't say that this other than maybe just coincidence. In some of your games, when you played really good on defense, you were missing people. Tucson was an example. I think Iowa State was an example. Yesterday or against West Virginia was an example. I would wonder aloud, were things simpler for everybody in those games because you were missing people? That's typically what happens. We don't have a lot of time with a lot of these guys that are going to be filling in, and so we can't put too much on them. So let's not, I don't know, dumb it down is not the right way, but let's call less, or let's focus on a few things and then just play really fast. Let's be aggressive. Boom, 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 boom. And I think in those cases you did. So I just wonder if there was, is there too much on the menu? Is there too much? I don't know. So I just think that, and I do think it'll be interesting to see kind of where Joey goes now, what direction you turn, because it's got to happen fairly quickly. I mean, Callan, you think about it, the portal window opens up a week from now, and if I'm a D tackle or an edge guy, or I'd kind of like to know what scheme I'm playing in and for whom.
I'm not sure this is going to be a popular move with the fans. I think Tim DeRuyter could be the most popular departure in recent memory, in my opinion, as far as departing coordinators go. And I share some of that reaction to it. I've said before, I didn't really want to see Tim DeRuyter jettisoned. I do feel like you have more of a player problem than a coaching problem. But the caveat to that is the coach on the college level, especially, is primarily responsible for what players you're getting on your campus. So I really hope via making this change, you're going after a guy that can get players on this campus and is maybe more known for that than anything else. Because I don't, this from a scheme standpoint, you kind of touched on it there. Personally, just as a football fan, and we've heard this with various defensive coordinators that have come through Lubbock, when I hear things about I want to be multiple, I want to be varied, I want to be yada, 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 I'm thinking, oh, cripes, here we go. Because it just seems like sometimes – I actually remember playing for a coach like this. Sometimes guys are outthinking the room to a degree, and one of the most difficult things maybe is to simplify in some ways. And maybe that points to what you're kind of talking about with some of those weeks where things were a little bit more simple. So I hope maybe we kind of get away from, hey, we want to be all, so varied and multiple and things like that with the next choice. But I was a fan of Coach DeRuyter. He's an established guy for a reason. I think fans will also kind of remember some of the decisions made as far as field position is concerned and what you were doing on fourth downs at various points, and probably cut him a little slack for some of those spots that the defense was known for being put in over the last few years. Earlier this year, that kind of lessened as the season went on for whatever reason. But I don't know. How do you feel about that, the popularity aspect of it? Because I think this guy will leave as a coordinator with probably as much goodwill from the fan base as a lot of coordinators I can remember, or any others maybe in a recent era. Unfortunately, we've been through a few of these, by the way, so there are plenty of comparisons to make.
Yeah, I think your last two defensive coordinators have actually had moments where they've done really good jobs and kind of turned it a bit. I think had you not had some of these games where you're just like, it just looks like you just can't get the opponent stopped, Tim would have maybe been given more time here, or a chance to, because I mean, you could have gone this direction and said, hey, we want to keep you in, but you got to make some changes. We need to do some things, whatever that looks like on your side of the ball or whatever. But when you just look like you couldn't get Oklahoma State stopped or ACU stopped, and you really had no answer. And the ACU game, you had, I think, other than Braylon Lux didn't play, and I think that we got to mention that you had everybody at your disposal then. No Data and no Spencer, I think, is accurate there as well. But those guys were lost for the season. But so there were certainly some injuries that he dealt with all year. Not having Charles Esters and Harvey Dyson for the first couple of weeks. You're losing a Data and Spencer, and not having Lux, give or take at times. Not having your top three, losing Duda Banks when you did. But
do you think it's fair to say coming in that like there was an expectation this defense would regress? Because that's how I felt as a fan because of the players you lost. And maybe the regression was just way too much or kind of too dramatic, or what do you think an expectation was internally coming into the year regarding that side?
I think you were, this is what we talked about in August. I think you were excited about the
First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Never sweat buying tickets to your favorite event again with Gametime. It's always a breeze using the Gametime app where you're going to find the best last-minute deals, and I love being able to scout out a view from any seat before pulling the trigger. And of course, you're always doing it at the lowest price guaranteed. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins, which means you can finish off that final brat, that final beer at your own pace at the tailgate, because Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. Gametime gives you the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets, but not just fast, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Gametime app and create an account and use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed.
This is what we talked about in August. I think you were excited about the possibilities, but nervous about the possibilities too because of how young it was. And youth leads to inconsistency. You know, youth, that's what young players do sometimes. It's especially when you have a bunch of them, and it's just, you know, I think these were maybe lower lows than I was expecting. Is that fair? When you're giving up 51 out of the gate to ACU?
Yeah, out of the gate to ACU, could
and granted,
never recover.
They are in the second round of the FBS playoffs, FCS playoffs. But still, I'm with you. You know, too many quarterbacks had career days against you, but you just had seen some times where it looked pretty good. But this is where Joey is the head coach, and that's the other thing. As you and I sit here, is this Kirby? Is this Kirby and Joey? Is this just Joey? Is this Joey and the folks like Cody and Dusty? Is this a collection of all the above? Is that you don't really know kind of where you want to go? Because he's still under, you know, both your coordinators are under contract for next year at their salaries. They started this past, you know, about a year ago. They started their 2-year deal, so 1 year is about up. And Tim's making over, I think he's making like close to 1.1 million. And that's the reason why I get into who all's decision was it, because you're going to owe him 70% of that number. That's not just on a whim. I can go, you know what, I'm going to make a change here. No, I think, you know, it's a collection of folks, because that's an expensive move to make. But if you feel like that is what is best, when you are 123rd in total defense and 122nd in scoring defense and 132nd in passing yards given up, and you sit there and you look at the championship game of the Big 12 and you go, we had wins over both of these cats. We beat both teams that are going to play for the freaking conference championship. And yet there was a few other times where we just couldn't get it figured out on a Saturday. Not that it's solely on the defense or anything. And that's what you just put all that together. And I think that's what leads to, like, we've got, because he told you, you know, we've got to do some things to change some stuff. So
it's funny. I think of some of the biggest game-winning plays when you can find it down to a play that are so memorable this season, and
Jacob Rodriguez.
Think about Jacob Rodriguez a couple of times. Yeah.
I mean, Tucson. I think Ames, Iowa. At times.
Even the play made in Stillwater. I mean, the timeliness of it, at least, turned out to be quite the difference maker, right? So it's frustrating, and I'm sure it's frustrating for all involved, because you like to have continuity, but if a change has to be made, then that's what has to be done. I'm curious, you kind of already answered my question about a hiring cycle. ASAP, I guess, was the answer. But I was also curious about dominoes to fall, because you make a change at this level. It really seems like, I mean, somewhat similar to the way a head coach builds a staff. I think a coordinator can build a staff on either side with guys that he likes, guys he has relationships with, et cetera. Do you have a guess on dominoes to fall beyond Tim DeRuyter?
Well, the new coordinator would have a lot of, or some say so there, you would think. That's just kind of like, man, if I come there, I need to bring this guy or these people. I need to have people around me that I trust, that know my system, whatever.
Yeah.
And Joey would have some say so there as well on kind of, and you try to find a happy medium. But yeah, and like, are you still more than likely you're probably trying to hire somebody that's probably still coaching on a team somewhere, and whether it's a team in the playoff or a team that's playing in a title game this weekend or a team that's in a bowl game. There's 82 teams going to a bowl game. So odds are, if you're hiring a head coach or, I wouldn't rule out anything here either. I think, Joey initially, looked at somebody from the NFL when he first got the job. I think that it's become very popular to, just look at what Gus Malzahn's did. Look at what Grant McCasland did with Jeff Linder. Like these kinds of moves where you have a head coach that could theoretically make, as much or maybe even a bit more and leave a group of 5 job or leave a head job and go be a coordinator and get paid as much or more. That is certainly on the table. Or do you go plug somebody from Joey always talks about, he's a big fan of Dan Lanning. He just mentioned it, recently. Do you go plug somebody off of that staff or try to? Again, you won't be the only one probably looking to make a hire here for a position. So, but I would think that timetable wise, it needs to happen quickly. That's the problem. The timing of this is always tricky because you would like to get somebody in place and like focus on your situation ASAP. They've got other stuff going and maybe other opportunities or a team to coach or whatever it may be. And meanwhile, you're a week away from like hosting defensive tackles and defensive ends and corners and a safety that all are asking you lots of questions that you potentially may not have answers to. Like, hey man, I want to come here because I'd like to get double-digit sacks, but I want to play in a 3-4 and I want you to feature me. But if we can do that, you may have no idea what scheme you're about to hire or what scheme you're going to employ. Hopefully that makes sense. So all this gets a bit tricky. That's why, you would like to think that some of this stuff happens fairly quickly, but it's not always up to you. We don't always get what we want, right?
Yeah.
I know I don't.
Well, I know this is just the beginning of what will be an eventful, not only week, but bowl season, portal season, coaching shuffle season, head on a swivel season. That's what it is. Appreciate the extra time here, Chris, to react to this news. And I'm sure there'll be more to come. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you miss nothing. Chris, we'll see you for the next one, whenever that may be.
You got it, man. These are ones that are not necessarily fun to do. All respect, Coach Reuter and his family will be just fine. But he did good work here. I just wish it would have ended better. Wish we were in Arlington next week, and his defense was a bigger reason as why as anything. But that's just not. It's a tough business, man. And but he's somebody I will think very fondly of, and we'll see kind of what else comes with all this. But I hate this part, but it's the reality of it, and that's what sucks. But guns up, we'll keep hope alive, and we'll be here for the next one or the next domino or whatever. So keep your head on a swivel, people.
Appreciate you guys being out there. As always, shout out to the everydayers and, of course, the Matador Mobsters. You want to become one of those, hit the show notes for a link there to a free 14-day trial. It's your direct line to Chris and myself with one-on-one text sent straight to your phone. Until the next go-around for Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks again for the time, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.